I'm joined by Shashi Tharoor. He is an Indian MP representing the Indian National Congress and is a former international diplomat. Mr. Tharoor, thank you very much for joining us this evening. You've come out in support of these strikes carried out by the Indian government. You've called them a fitting attack. Why are they justified?
They're justified because of the fact that, yet again, Pakistan-based terrorists, almost certainly armed, financed and guided from Pakistan, have come to our country and killed innocent civilians. In this case, 26 people, just ordinary tourists in a place called Pahalgam in Kashmir. And they've done this repeatedly. There have been at least 15 incidents in the last 25 years of this century in which more than 20 civilians have been killed. The world knows about the horrors of 26/11 in Mumbai in 2008, when we had 170 people being butchered by Pakistani terrorists. The script is tiresomely predictable. They deny every time any responsibility until, of course, the evidence is conclusively established. In that particular instance, it was a case of one of the terrorists being captured alive, and Pakistan had to admit he was one of theirs. We've seen Pakistan brazenly denying they even knew where Osama bin Laden was until the Americans found him being hidden in a Pakistani military cantonment. This is the pattern there. This is a state that sponsors terrorism in the most vile manner, and a response absolutely had to be issued in order to make it clear there's a price to be paid for this kind of conduct. I think the Indian public expected no less, and I believe that what India did was a very sensibly calibrated response, where they were careful, first of all, to avoid collateral damage by striking at night, striking buildings which were known to be headquarters of wanted militant and terrorist groups, most of which have been proscribed by the United Nations Security Council. So these headquarters, known to be in Pakistan, were attacked, but very few casualties amongst the civilian population, because the attacks were at 1 o'clock at night. And at the same time, the Indians showed self-restraint in not attacking Pakistani government or military installations in order to deny Islamabad an excuse to go up the escalatory ladder. I think this is, broadly speaking, a kind of way of saying we are responding to terrorism, but we are not interested in creating a protracted conflict. And I think that message has been understood by many countries who have shown some sympathy for India's situation.
I understand you held some wide-ranging discussions with government ministers about how to respond to Pakistan. You said that much of what you suggested was actually carried out. How long were these talks going on for?
Not quite. No, these are not talks between me and government ministers. Government ministers do their own thing. This was what I advocated publicly in op-ed articles in the Indian press. As someone who tends to be asked for his views on international matters, this was precisely what I had advocated, and what has happened is precisely what I had hoped would happen, which is that they have taken a certain number of diplomatic measures, but a kinetic response was necessary in order to convey a signal that you can't just come here and kill our people and get away with it. You will have to pay a price.
Now, as you mentioned before, these strikes are based on India's claim that Pakistan was behind the deadly militant attack on Indian tourists in Pahalgam last month. But how do you respond to people who say that there was a lack of evidence supporting this?
Well, I've already responded in my earlier remarks. The Pakistanis constantly deny, because obviously they try and conceal evidence as much as possible. In one notorious attack, we were able to capture a terrorist alive. We haven't succeeded in doing that this time. There was an element of surprise. But the fact is that their denials absolutely have no basis. The motivation for the attack was very clear. It was not only to completely disrupt tourism in Kashmir in order to undermine the process of normalcy that was gaining ground, to shatter the Kashmiri economy, which was thriving, and thereby to hope to increase discontent in Kashmir against New Delhi. It was also very much in order to put Kashmir back in the international spotlight and internationalize the dispute, all of which only serves one person, one set of people, and that's the Pakistani military. The Pakistani military is deeply unpopular in Pakistan. They've locked up their most popular leader, the cricketer Imran Khan, and they are now in a position where they need some sort of action in order to once again portray themselves to their own people as the saviors of their country. And this is precisely the only set of people who have anything to gain from what happened, that cruel, barbaric attack on innocent civilian tourists. This is why there is absolutely, if you like, circumstantial evidence that we can point to. I don't personally have any access to intelligence intercepts. The Indian Foreign Secretary today said there was intelligence information pointing very clearly to Pakistan, and I would not be surprised if that information has been shared on a confidential basis between intelligence communities of India and influential countries in the world. So publicly, we may not have the sort of evidence. Privately, India was pretty convinced, and most of us who follow these matters closely, as I have done for decades now, I can assure you we have not a shred of doubt about Pakistani complicity.
Mr. Tharoor, you also say that these strikes wouldn't justify further expansion of the conflict, but can you guarantee that there won't be more violence as a result?
No, there could well be. The Pakistani Prime Minister has issued a blood-curdling threat to have his revenge and so on. Now, that might just be for domestic consumption, or it might actually be a serious threat to escalate, in which case India is certainly ready. And I have absolutely no doubt that the Indian government would be prepared to respond when necessary. I equally have no doubt, though, that governments around the world are going to be putting considerable pressure on Islamabad to not go too far in their response. In fact, we've seen an episode just 6 years ago, in January of 2019, when there was a similar attack that unfortunately killed 40 Indian security personnel, and India reacted with one single airstrike on a Pakistani facility that trained terrorists, and Pakistan essentially let it be, as if honor was satisfied on both sides. This time, that was not going to be enough. India had to do more. India has done more, but Pakistan claims that they have shot down Indian jets. Now, this is true. That might be enough, perhaps, to persuade them that they've exacted their pound of flesh and they have no interest either in going for war. But if they do go for war, mark my words, their capacity to sustain a long conflict is decidedly inferior to India's, and they will again, unfortunately, have a very, very severe price to pay.
Well, finally on that, Mr. Tharoor, in the last hour or so, Pakistan's Prime Minister's office has announced that the country's armed forces have been authorised to undertake corresponding actions. Are you concerned by this?
As I say, some of this could merely be for internal consumption. It depends on what those actions are. They have been shelling ferociously across the sort of line of control between the two countries, having killed 10 civilians on the Indian side already. So unfortunately, they have undertaken some actions, and we are responding in kind. But if indeed Pakistan were to do more than that, if, for example, they were going to attempt to strike Indian cities and so on, then I'm afraid they're asking for very serious trouble.
Mr. Shashi Tharoor, we appreciate you taking the time to speak to us. Thank you so much.
Thank you.